Folks, thanks a lot for the 70,000 subscribers. You guys are awesome. But we're not stopping here. Let's push it, folks, to 100,000 subscribers. So give that support to the channel and subscribe and hit that like button down below to reach our goal of 153 likes. And now let's go for it. The anime begins with an elderly couple taking care of their apple orchard. Then Shouzou Saitou apologizes to his wife, Ine Saitou, for not having the honeymoon they wanted due to lack of money at the time. But Ine says there's no need to worry because she's happy with the life they had. Ine remembers the apple tree they planted when they got married about 60 years ago was nearby. Shouzou recalls the tree was broken in half by a typhoon and finds it, identifying the patch he made on it. They admire nature when Ine notices a golden apple on the tree, which surprises the couple. Later, the couple returns home while Shouzou regrets not giving his wife a better life due to his condition when he was young, noting that she stayed with him despite probably having many things she would have liked to do. Shouzou cries in the bathroom thinking about this when suddenly he looks in the mirror and realizes that for some mysterious reason, he had become young again. Startled, he rushes to Ine and discovers she is also rejuvenated. The old man then gets excited about having a honeymoon with his wife. The next day, the couple's granddaughter, Mino, comes to visit and is surprised to see her grandparents so young. However, after the surprise wears off, the girl is enchanted by her handsome grandfather and sticks to him. Later, Mino's father, Yoshiaki, takes her home and the girl tells him that her grandparents have become young again, but he takes it as a joke from his daughter. In the park, some neighbors reflect on missing the Saitou couple who weren't visiting as often due to age and health. But now that the two have rejuvenated, Shouzou is a hit with the elderly ladies in the neighborhood, while Ine also catches the attention of the elderly men. In the past, Yoshiaki asked his parents to come live with him because the couple's age was advancing and the son was worried about them living alone. But Shouzou refused to leave their land, which has been in the family for generations. While Yoshiaki tried to convince the old man to move, Ine washed dishes with her daughter-in-law, Kid, Yoshiaki's wife, who decides to ask what her mother-in-law would like as she hadn't yet expressed her desires. But Ine said it didn't matter to her. As long as she could be with her husband, anything would do. In the present, Kid visits her in-laws to drop off some ingredients that Ine had requested. However, she is surprised to find Shouzou looking super young. He explains that his wife went to a community center meeting, acting calmly because he thought his granddaughter had already told her the news. But upon seeing Kade's shock, Shouzou apologizes for acting so naturally. Completely surprised, Kade asks to use the bathroom, where she processes what she had just seen and is surprised to find out she has a handsome father-in-law. Later, Kade calls her husband, who goes there with Mino. Yoshiaki is surprised to see his parents and realizes that Mino was telling the truth about them becoming young again. Then he questions Kade for not telling him the news as soon as she found out, but she explains that she thought it was better to tell him in person. At that moment, everyone notices Mino clinging to her grandfather and Kade scolds the girl while Shouzou makes it clear that he only has eyes for Ine, comforting his wife, while Yoshiaki is speechless at the scene. But Ine doesn't like seeing someone on top of her husband and reprimands him with a slap on the face. After the confusion, Yoshiaki, his wife and daughter say goodbye to go back home because he has to go to work. Then Ine worries about her son working too hard and pets him, which makes the man remember when he was a child, and she praised him for his hard work in the same way. Mino also feels like getting some head patting, and Ine grants her granddaughter's wish. Later, the elderly in the neighborhood are worried about the annual sports festival, because since the school in Manamamachi closed due to another school opening in Kitamachi, there are no more children living in the area, and the population is getting older, making it difficult for them to win the festival, not to mention the fear of someone having a heart attack during the event, which resulted in Kitamachi winning every year. The elderly of Manamamachi, unable to see hope, consider giving up, until they see Shouzou and his new muscles as the light at the end of the tunnel even bow to the guy. Then they ask Shouzou to participate in the festival with them, making it clear that they won't accept no for an answer, and he complains about being deceived because he went there thinking it was a community center meeting. On the day of the sports festival, the head of the neighborhood council of Kitamachi, named Haisuke Igarashi, appears to taunt his opponents, saying he heard that Manamamechi might not participate in the festival that year, since all the participants are over 50 years old. He then shows off his young grandsons to the elderly. One of them is the star of the school's soccer team named Shouta Igarashi, and the other is the captain of the school's baseball team named Daiki Igarashi. The three laugh at the idea of competing with a bunch of old people, acting as if victory is guaranteed. Then the leader of the Manamamaki Neighborhood Association, an old man named Sanano, warns that this year they have prepared a triumphant weapon, the Saitou couple. Haisuke, who knows the two, acts as if Sanano had told a joke until the couple appears completely rejuvenated and leaves the old man and his two grandsons speechless. Haizuki even thinks those are Saitou's grandchildren, but Shouzou explains that they themselves have become young. And so the festival begins with a tug-of-war where both teams make their utmost effort to win until a lady convinces Ine to be the Minamemechi's cheerleader. As soon as she starts cheering, both Shouzou and his companions increase their willpower, leading them to their first victory. Ine feels a little embarrassed for having been a cheerleader at her age, but she's intrigued to discover that her husband enjoys such things. Next, the relay race moves on to the three-legged race, where everyone runs in pairs with their feet tied together to the finish line. Shouzou and Daiki strive to make up for their loss in the tug-of-war, while Haizuki is hopeful for victory, as the two brothers have been practicing sports together for over 10 years and know each other's quirks and rhythms better than any other pair. At this moment, an elderly couple from Minamemechi finally completes the course, apologizing for being more than halfway behind, making way for the Saitou couple to enter the action. Then Shouzou and Daiki find themselves close to the finish line and think victory is theirs when suddenly Ine and Shouzou approach them and then easily pass by. The couple literally runs in a way that doesn't even seem like their feet are tied together after all. They've been together for almost 70 years and Shouzou knows his wife's rhythm well, adjusting his speed to synchronize with hers. And so the Saitou couple wins the three-legged race just like all the other games in the relay, leading Minamemechi to victory, leaving Haizuki and his grandsons frustrated. Shouzou and Daiki reflect that competing isn't as easy as they thought, while Haizuki is furious that Shouzou stole Ine from him in the past and now stole his grandchildren's smiles. He then tries to console the two when Ine appears to apologize for getting so carried away in the games. Haizuki asks if she shouldn't be with her husband, and Ine explains that it's not possible because Shouzou became super popular after winning the relay and is surrounded by people. Ine then shows that she brought a meal for everyone to share and offers it to Haizuki and his grandsons. And so they eat together while remembering that it's been 3 years since Haizuki lost his wife. Then Ine comments that Shouzou and Daiki resemble their grandfather when he was younger, which reminds her of when Haizuki confessed his love to her, and the grandsons are shocked to discover their grandfather's interest in Ine and realize that's why he caused a rift with Shouzou. Then Ine tells the two not to lament their loss and to strive to come back stronger in the multisport relay the following year, which makes the boys admire her and think it's no wonder their grandfather couldn't win her over, leaving Haizuki furious. A week after the relay, Haizuki sends Shouzou to deliver something to the Saitou couple's house to thank Ine for what she did that day. The boy goes there and is greeted by Mino. Shouzou feels awkward seeing her, who thanks him for the delivery and invites him in. The boy agrees to enter the house but feels nervous being alone with her because his family had gone out shopping. They both studied in the same class, and Mino is the popular girl at school while he struggles to socialize, leaving him completely awkward and unsure how to act around her. So to pass the time, Shouzou decides to fiddle with his phone, but Mino approaches him to see what he's playing, making him even more anxious. At that moment, Kate arrives with her in-laws and stands at the door not knowing what to do. Kate panics at seeing her daughter alone with a boy while Shouzou is at a loss for how to interrupt their conversation. Later, the three enter the house and discover why Shouzou went there. Shouzou is super friendly and kind to the boy, but Ine and Kate already make him worried and feeling as if he's in a parent-teacher meeting. So to start a conversation, Shouzou asks his granddaughter if they're in the same class. Mino confirms and says that Shouzou is smart and good at sports, causing Cade to whisper about it with Ine, thinking he's a good boy for her daughter. Seeing the two whispering, Shouzou decides to step in and starts asking Shouzou if he likes any girl, but Ine stops him from interfering like that. Then Shouzou says goodbye to the family and Mino tells him to come back whenever he wants. Then Kid and Ine find it amusing how the two bid each other farewell so formally, meaning they weren't even proper friends. However, when the boy leaves, Mino ends up regretting for herself that Shouzou left, quietly wishing she could have talked to him alone for longer. Shouzou overhears his granddaughter's comment, but decides to keep this fact a secret. Meanwhile, Shouzou asks his grandfather to send him to do something at the Saitou's house, so he has an excuse to go back there again. The next day, Mino talks to her grandparents and learns that Ine confessed to Shouzou first. He explains that at the time, despite being happy to receive the confession since he had always been interested in Ine, he told her that it wouldn't be possible for them to be together because at that time it was very difficult for people to marry for love, and his father, Mino's great-grandfather, was very conservative and intended to marry him off to a friend's daughter. Mino finds it awful that Shouzou wasn't free to choose who he would marry, and Ine says that at that time, a person's family influenced others. Then the girl asks what her grandfather did, and he replies that he ended up getting into a fight with his father, and for a while he even considered running away with Ine. But she managed to solve their problem beforehand. Shouzou says his wife was incredible at the time and called the girl, who was going to have an arranged marriage with him, to say she wouldn't let her have her love. Mino is proud of her grandmother, and she says that apparently the girl already liked someone and only accepted giving up the marriage. Then Mino pleads with her grandmother to pretend she's the girl and represent what she said at the time. Ine feels embarrassed but notices her husband looking at her with anticipation and decides to make this effort for him and her granddaughter, who are filled with pride at seeing the enactment. Walking in an apple orchard, a pair of young boys conclude that this farm business is for old folks and young people like them should head to the city, maybe even move to Tokyo and make some cash. One of the boys believes he can quickly find a girlfriend in a big city, and speaking of which, they spot a beautiful young woman instead of the elderly couple who take care of this orchard. The girl notices the boys looking at her and says good afternoon, making the duo run away in embarrassment. A little farther away, they think she's the daughter or granddaughter of the elderly couple, until the woman's husband arrives and she calls him dear old man, leaving the boys even more confused. When he arrives with his truck full of apples, the man asks the boys to be careful on their way home and leaves with the beautiful woman as if nothing had happened. So the boys change their minds and decide they'll be farmers when they grow up. Flashback to the past, when the couple was still elderly, Ine asks to throw away some flyers and her husband agrees. However, upon seeing a dress on sale for 3,000 yen, the woman changes her mind and takes the flyer along to prepare dinner. The next day, young Ine asks young Shouzou if he went anywhere today. The man replies that he just took a light walk, so his wife is confused to see a package on the ground. Upon opening it, she sees it's the dress she wanted so much, and assuming her husband bought it, she reciprocates with affection, but Shouzou sees that he's been caught. Later, they silently prepare dinner together, and then watch a romantic movie at Mino's request. And in this movie, Shouzou notices that today's youth are watching some extreme stuff, in his opinion. For him, even if there's no more kissing between him and his wife, it's much more important that they understand each other so well. Ine seems not to agree so much with her husband as she's paying attention to the kissing scene. When Shouzou draws her attention to this, Ine sees no other option but to ask him for something. Soon Shouzou accepts his beloved's request and the two reenact the kiss they just saw in the movie. Despite their efforts, Ine can't feel the expected effect after all. They've been together for 50 years, and they're no longer teenage lovers. With that, the man already assumes the stance of "I told you so," because according to him, that's something for young people. Ine agrees on the surface, but inside, she's sweating. In the late afternoon, an old friend of the couple arrives at their house and asks Mino if they're home because she brought mountain asparagus and other gifts. As the lady had an extremely strong accent, the young woman couldn't understand a word of what she was saying. To save the situation, Ine appears celebrating the arrival of Mrs. Kakya from the fish market. Kakya doesn't understand what's going on, so she asks her friend why all the fuss. Ine replies that she just got a little younger, so the lady assesses Mino to notice that she's really the same age as her dear grandson, so she offers him to the girl. Then Ine hugs the girl and says she won't let her marry yet, but Mino would love it if it were with her grandfather. Later, the daughter of the couple's second son, Takahiro, fought with her father and ran away to her grandmother's house. Even though she's happy to have somewhere to spend the night, young Shiori doesn't understand how the old lady got so young like this. Ine offers something for the girl to eat, but she's sulking and refuses because the bullying she's been facing has impacted her psyche a lot. Shiori is the classic school nerd, and besides being teased for it, at home her father acts as if she has to meet his expectations, forcing the girl to study medicine. Therefore, the girl thinks she's lost everything tonight: her desire to study, her future prospects, and her own father. However, Ine argues that just the fact that the girl is crying is proof that she cares and keeps fighting. When she was a child, Shiori said she wanted to be a doctor to cure all the diseases in the world, and even though she's changed her mind today, Shiori has never stopped being a beloved granddaughter. Hearing this, the girl bursts into tears and enjoys her grandmother's hug, besides asking to have dinner with her. In another flashback from the past, Ine apologizes to her husband for not being able to travel on vacation because she got sick, but the man is understanding and puts his wife's health first. Ine encourages him to take little Yoshiaki for a walk on the beach, but Shouzou thinks it's not the same without his wife by his side. Ine jokes that the guy is eager to see her in a bikini, so he teases that he also wants to make other guys at the beach jealous. Back to the present, Ine thinks that young people are really showing off their bodies too much everywhere lately, while she wonders what kind of bikini would make Shouzou happy to see her wearing. She knows he's a pervert, but maybe walking around in a short bikini is too much for her. Therefore, she decides to wear the white dress she received the other day. Peeking into her grandmother's dilemma, Shiori advises her to be more daring and show off that beautiful body God gave her for the world to see. Ine reminds the girl that she's old inside, but Shiori doesn't see anything wrong with her grandmother showing off a bit for her husband. Finally, Ine decides to think about it while making dinner, so Shiori tells her grandfather that the woman left and says he's hopeless because everything was a plan to convince Ine to wear a short bikini. Suddenly, the phone rings and Ine answers asking if it's Yoshiaki. On the other end, the guy confirms it is, but since his voice doesn't sound like much, he says he caught a cold that messed up his throat. Suspicious, the woman decides to record the call, while the man on the line says that Ine's voice sounds younger. After that, getting straight to the point, the supposed Yoshiaki says that an unexpected situation arose and that's why he needs 200,000 yen. So she writes down the code for the bank transfer, but before calling, she tells the guy on the other line that she's not his real mother, but if he needs to talk to someone, just call. With that, the man hangs up immediately. The next day, the guy who tried to scam Ine ended up getting arrested. Watching the news on TV, Shouzou asks his wife to stay alert, but she knows well that after 6 p.m., the phone line turns into a free-for-all. Later that day, Ine discovers that she no longer needs to wear her glasses because her eye has rejuvenated so much that she can see things even the young Mino can't. With a hidden agenda, Mino asks if Grandma can read what's written in the newspaper, and as soon as she repeats the article shown, Shouzou appears on the scene. So the girl challenges her grandma to read the words she points to, and reading one by one, Ine completes the sentence. "Darling, you are charming." And Mino uses that to say that the old lady is shamelessly flirting with Grandpa. 5 minutes later, the couple was forcing the granddaughter to complete the sentence. "I like someone, and that person is." But before completing it, Mino tries to escape the embarrassment, and even Grandpa feels sorry for the girl. Sometime later, Mino is watching another romantic movie when she asks Grandma if she ever held hands with Grandpa. Ine replies no, because doing so is equivalent to shouting in the street that you're dating. As for Shouzou, when you get old, holding hands is to help each other not to fall flat, and hearing these things, Mino comments on the lack of romance between the couple. Later, returning from the neighborhood stores, the couple feels happy to have gotten some Chinese cabbage. Since the weather is cold, Shouzou notices that his wife is not wearing a glove on her right hand, and inside, the woman is eager for her husband to notice. However, if he holds her hand, Shouzou thinks he's giving in to the granddaughter, and he doesn't want to give the brat the satisfaction. Ine tries to drop some hints to her husband about being cold, but the man dodges them all. Suddenly, Ine looks at his hand, and with her heart pounding, she gathers the courage to hold hands with her man. Sometime later, they tell the story of how they became younger to their second son, Takahiro. The man doesn't know how, but he's sure those are his parents looking young, so he asks how they feel. And they both say they're great and full of life. Examining the strange situation, Takahiro sees that his mother's breathing has become steadier than before, and her pulse has slowed down. This convinces the son that his parents have become younger, so later he promises to deliver the results when they're ready. However, Ine's examination reveals that she has liver cancer, and since she just recovered from gastroenteritis, they recommend that she undergo blood tests and a tomography, and based on the results, treatment will be initiated. Upon receiving this news, Takahiro remembers that he became a doctor to save his mother, but in the end, all he did was introduce a good doctor to her. Watching her get weaker every day, Takahiro wondered what he could do. Even though he hadn't done anything directly, somehow he feels rewarded for everything he's done so far, and that's why he cries, remembering when he promised his mother he would be a doctor. In the past, as their children grew up, Shouzou and Ine's love for the farm and their way of life grew as well, and everything seemed to be going in a great direction. It was sudden when the typhoon came and broke the apple tree in half. The couple did everything they could to keep it from dying, and over the years, leaving every drop of sweat in the maintenance of that tree, one day the golden apple appeared on its dry branches. As Shouzou cuts the apple, he would love to place that beautiful shiny piece on his Shinto altar, but Ine thinks that would be the same as letting it rot for free. Moreover, its appearance is very eye-catching, almost an invitation to be eaten. That said, the two finally share the fruit. Meanwhile, the apple tree, thankful for the treatment it received, finally disappears in a mystical way. After eating the apple, Ine wakes up in a completely strange environment until she comes face to face with a gigantic hourglass. Floating in the air, the hourglass spins, restarting its count, and falls on the lady. Soon we see that Ine was recounting her dream about the hourglass, and Shouzou says he had the same dream, so he's puzzled. Speaking of connections, today marks the 58th anniversary of their marriage, so Ine asks if her husband wants to eat something different, like a cake, for example. Shouzou replies that he doesn't mind eating the same old thing, and that eating cake is for kids, but she knows he must be playing hard to eventually show a surprise as always. Ine prepared red rice for tonight, and upon opening the refrigerator to check on it, she notices the piece of cake right next to it. Ine throws it in her husband's face that he was bluffing, and he returns the favor by displaying the rice prepared by his wife. Ine asks if her husband lies like this to the granddaughter too, so Shouzou replies that he only does it with his dear Ine because only she deserves that kind of lie. Then the two enjoy the surprises side by side as always. After the meal, Shouzou recalls that after finishing middle school, he went to work on the farm, so he didn't have much time to study. Ine joined a women-only school in Tokyo for a brief period, and it seemed like a dream there. She could eat white rice whenever she wanted, and the faucet was so good it seemed like a waterfall. However, with the arrival of the war, the school turned into rubble, and soon Ine was thrown into a life of anguish and loneliness in the swamp of the field. But it was there that she met the man of her life, and since then, the mud didn't seem so bad anymore. Shouzou remembers that Tokyo was the typical capital where everything could be found, but Ine emphasizes that there are things in the countryside that cannot be seen there. However, as she decides to keep it a secret, the man is dying of curiosity. Later, Shiori shows up with a video game because, according to her father, it would be good to give to the grandparents to play to prevent dementia. On the other hand, Shouzou thinks that flashing lights on a screen shouldn't be children's favorite game, but rather a card game like Menko, Tag, or Spinning Tops. As they start the game Danger in the Rice Field 3, Shouzou is terrified of the undead, while Ine repeats the phrase Namu Amida Butsu, which means I take refuge in Amida Buddha. Within the game, an old man kept repeating tirelessly that things are about to get ugly, and Shouzou believes that the man there has already been caught by dementia. When they find a healing herb, Ine thinks she will be punished by the Buddhas for stealing from someone else's house. The grandpa, however, doesn't believe it's possible to heal by eating a sour cassava root. Reflecting on the poor undead, the couple agrees that it wasn't their choice to become like this, so they must shoot the poor souls in the head to spare everyone's suffering. After exterminating the enemies one by one, a zombie drops a chainsaw, and since the husband already has the shotgun, the wife takes the chainsaw. Right next to them, the zombies were making a tremendous mess in the rice field, so the farmers decide not to have mercy on these wrongdoers. Together, they cut and blew up every undead present until they exterminated that putrid race from the sacred rice field. The next day, they had already platinumed the game, so they gave up because there was nothing else to do. Later, Mino arrives home and reunites with Shiori after a long time. With a teasing look, she hugs her cousin who tries to push the girl back. They study at the same school, but since it's in different buildings, they barely see each other. In childhood, they had some closeness because they always played together, but as Shiori insists on reminding, that's water under the bridge. For Mino, what isn't water under the bridge is Shiori's love for her grandparents. And it's so much love that the girl is still at their house until now, so she can act tough, but she's still a sweetheart inside. However, Shiori is irritated and corrects Mino, saying that it's not quite like that with this talk of liking grandparents, but she didn't count on poor Shouzou crossing the room at that exact moment because upon hearing what Shiori said, the old man's about to have the fit thinking his granddaughter hates him. With the typical stubbornness of a pre-adolescent, the girl stubbornly refuses to justify herself, but soon she gives in and explains to her grandfather that it was just a way of speaking. In the end, she doesn't admit that she loves her grandfather, but she asks him not to hate her, and that's enough for the old man to soften his heart and thank her for being alive up to this moment. Sometime later, Shouzou is once again thrown into the daily dream where he's facing a hourglass, just like his wife. Shouzou reflects that since they became young again, they've been making the most of their time together, but there are still many things they haven't done, like the honeymoon in Yoshiaki. With their bodies rejuvenated, it's now possible to fulfill dreams that were lost with old age, and the couple enjoys every moment as if the hourglass could turn over again at any moment. Until on this day, that's what happened. Upon waking up, Shouzou wakes up his wife and shows her that he lost his youth suddenly. He argues that fortunately he still doesn't feel the joint pains as before, but he believes that certainly his wife prefers the young version of her husband. In response, Ine clarifies that it wasn't the young or old version that made her fall in love, but Shouzou Saitou himself, the only one in the whole world. Listening with affection, Shouzou sees that his wife is right. Thinking that being old is something bad is disrespectful to all the history they have lived together because until yesterday, it was the condition they had, but it never stopped the couple from staying together and loving each other. Upon regaining his youth, even being an old version of himself, the man ended up forgetting who he really was. Therefore, even though Shouzou continues with this worn-out body, he promises to keep the honeymoon they promised. After all, he feels too young to give up on life. Back at the Saitou clinic, Takahiro has no idea what's going on with his parents because despite their aged appearance, Shouzou still has the muscles of a young man. Nevertheless, his liver and kidneys were not as lucky, so it's better not to overexert himself. Soon after, talking only with his mother, Takahiro informs that his father is a little healthier than he was before becoming young again. Therefore, his real concern is Ine because at the moment she has the body of a healthy 20-year-old, and if she ages from this condition slowly, it's worrying to think about how much life she would have ahead of her. Anyway, the woman doesn't fear her death, but the way things have been going, her husband will certainly depart first. After all, if she lives for another 70 years, their own children won't be in this world anymore, or maybe even their granddaughters, and that's the last thing Ine wants, to die alone. Later, Shouzou reveals to the family that he got old again. Nevertheless, he shows that his father's arm is still cracking, and he proves it in an arm wrestling match with his son. Yoshiaki asks the old man not to push it, but he's quite confident. Not as confident as his son, who promises to pay for a room with an outdoor bath and a tatami for the old man if he wins the contest. At that moment, Shouzou daydreams about a hot tub beside his cat-like naked wife, causing his veins to stiffen like a Saiyan transformation in their golden years, putting pressure on Yoshiaki. Mino, the judge, begins the countdown to the start of the match, which ends in a second with a resounding victory for Mr. Shouzou Saitou, who toasts with Ine to the power of perversion. Later, while shopping at a home improvement center, Shouzou feels that since he's grown old again, people look at him and Ine as if they're not a real couple. Because of this, he distances himself from his wife out of shame for what others might think, confessing to her that maybe it's better if they pretend they're not married when they go out together. To make matters worse, a clerk soon approaches, assuming Shouzou is looking for a gift for his granddaughter, and Shouzou decides not to correct him. But it's Ine herself who steps in and corrects the clerk, explaining that she is this man's wife. On the way back home, she makes it clear that she doesn't want to be anything other than his wife, regardless of what others may think. As days pass, Shouzou notices that Ine hasn't been eating her favorite treat in front of him, the name daifuku, even though they used to enjoy it together when they were young. He understands that he's old now and may develop diabetes, but his wife, on the other hand, can't say the same. So he decides to question young Ine, but she says she's not hungry and will eat later. In the wee hours, Ine indulges in the sweets alone once again because her husband isn't taking care of his health, and since he's aged again, she's afraid of causing him serious problems, so she's avoiding tempting him with the daifuku. However, this time the old man was on the lookout to catch her in the act, and although she comes up with an excuse, Shouzou understands that she's worried about him. But for him, seeing the happiness on her face while enjoying her favorite treat is the best medicine. Thus, the couple understands each other once again and makes a pact to enjoy the treat without guilt. Many years ago, Ine recalls that her parents passed away and she lost her home, so she went to live with maternal relatives to work for them. Her father had a lot of money when he was alive, but since he acted arrogantly towards his wife's family, Ine ended up being despised by them. As if that weren't enough, the young girl couldn't even understand what the old ladies were saying because they used an older dialect of Japanese. Speaking the Tokyo dialect isolated her even more within the house, and her mother's family residence was not comfortable. Therefore, after finishing her work in the fields, young Ine spent her time at a Shinto shrine. Until one day, she met that young man from the rice harvest again and introduced herself as Sasaki. The man's name is Saitou, and he was picking apples not far away. Speaking of food, he hears the girl's stomach growl and offers her some of his rice. So the girl looks around and questions if he happens to know who she is. Regardless, Shouzou believes that no matter where the girl is from, it's no excuse to let her go hungry, so he leaves the rice with her, who realizes that not everyone in this region is stingy. A few days later, Shouzou began to return frequently to Ine's house in the late afternoon, using the excuse that he always passes by the shrine on his way home. However, things weren't going as expected, and the girl started to feel uncomfortable with the young man's presence, trying to keep him away so that others wouldn't misunderstand their relationship. To Ine, Shouzou was too restless and seemed illiterate, so she wondered if he could really soften her heart for a man like him. So returning to the present day, Ine's heart was as soft as melted butter, when suddenly, on an ordinary day, Shouzou had the hourglass dream again after a long time. Shouzou presumes that turning the hourglass back could bring back his youth, so he doesn't miss the chance to try his luck. Having done so, there was the old man with his former youthful appearance, but instead of celebrating, Ine just asked the man to fix his messy hair. However, Shouzou's return to youth once again raised the debate, and Ine questions whether they will indeed grow old and die like everyone else. In Shouzou's opinion, this hourglass works just like the others, and its sand continues to count time as it should, and someday it will run out too. Shouzou isn't sure what will happen when that day comes, but he believes it will be the end of their miraculous youth. Therefore, Ine shouldn't worry about eternity or about leaving after the children and grandchildren. Speaking of which, Ine is the only person Shouzou doesn't want to leave behind, so he'll be there by her side no matter what. Hey folks, we're kicking off the new anime season, and if you enjoyed this anime and want to see more of it, go ahead and hit that like button down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to reach our goal of 70,000 subscribers. Every subscription counts and helps us grow our community. Catch you next time.